Hello and welcome to this episode of Community Voices Uganda on Civic Space TV. I am Philip Molisa. On this episode, we're having a conversation about the status of non-government organizations in Uganda, and we are looking at the series of amendments, the series of changes that government of Uganda is looking to create in this sector in terms of financing, in terms of membership, in terms of activity. And indeed, we want to try and make sense of all these changes, of what is happening, what is on ground, and indeed what they intend to achieve in terms of all the changes that are due in Parliament of Uganda, and indeed all the other sectors that are involved in this sector. Joining me on that conversation is a panel of distinguished citizens who are part of this sector of governance in this country. And I will invite them to say hello to my audience, and certainly we get into the depth of the conversation. I'll start with you, Florence Tumuheirwe. Florence is the Executive Director of Kigezi Women in Development. Florence, greetings. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm Tumuheirwe Florence, the Executive Director of Kigezi Women in Development. I'm happy to be part of this space.
Yes, thank you, Florence. And next I have Auma Tamali. Tamali is from the Grassroot Defenders Initiative. Tamali, greetings. You're welcome to the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much, Phillips, and good morning to our viewers. Those are my names, Tamali Auma, the Executive Director for Grassroot Defenders Initiative. I am honored to be part of this discussion. It is timely, I must say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tamali, for joining us. And indeed, we can't wait to hear what you have to share with us on this conversation today. And next, I have the ED of Kapchorwa Civil Society Organizations Alliance, and that is Robert Cheptoek. Robert, greetings. Welcome to the conversation, and I hope I get that name quite right. Okay, Robert is unable to hear me in the moment, but certainly he will speak to us as his connection normalizes, and indeed we get to listen from him and understand his thoughts about the topic in today. And lastly, I have Cynthia. Cynthia, greetings. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, Philip. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia. I work with Debate Institute Africa, and at the same time, I'm a programs manager for Young Orators Network that focuses in public speech training and debate. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, from Debate Institute Africa and the Young Orators Network. We're happy to have you. And Robert, someone in the technical office, kindly talk to Robert and see how we can assist him get a better connection so that we're able to speak to him. Kindly, technical team, let's have that ironed out. Now, colleagues, as that is worked on, we are here to talk about a sector that is very important in this country, and certainly I will leave that to you to explain how important it is for the people, because I have the actual people that make things run in this particular sector. I have executive directors of the different organizations that participate in the very many activities, projects undertaken by the non-government organization sector in this country. And I want to start with you, Florence. The conversation over time and the experience over time has taught us that there is always a disagreement between very many non-government organizations and the government of the Republic of Uganda, but we have also seen this in a couple of other nations, but specific to our country. When we see these kind of things happening in the country, first of all, what is the source of contention between government and non-government organizations? Because in that process, we've actually seen many being closed out, many having their licenses revoked, and so many things happening. What is the source of this kind of experience and reaction from both ends? Yes, Florence.
Yes, thank you for having me here. Non-government organizations, I want to first begin by talking about what it is, because NGOs exist to supplement government efforts. These are organizations that are independent, non-profit groups that operate outside government structures to address social, political, environmental, or economic issues. They can be local, national, international, and are often driven by a commitment to public interest or humanitarian causes. But in their operations, sometimes the government does not see it as I have said. They sometimes look at non-government organizations as maybe working with opposition, that is at the political end. And sometimes they look at non-government organizations as working towards the agenda of foreign countries, because non-government organizations always get foreign aid. So these are some of the issues where the government looks at non-government organizations as disturbing. Sometimes when some government organizations monitor budgets and hold governments accountable. So there, the government will see non-government organizations as entities that work to undermine their authority. So that's why the government puts on restrictive policies, and sometimes those policies are not out of goodwill, but they are intended to suppress the operations of non-government organizations. So I might
thank you,
say
Florence,
that,
and if you allow me, because when you say these are organizations that supplement the government of work, but outside the formal government structure, should we then say that these organizations are not supposed to work with government in any way? What should be the position? Do they work with government, or they work completely independent of government?
I may say they work together, but they have independent opinions and principles. That is why I have said that in their operations, sometimes the government looks at them as some entities that support opposition agendas, or support or implement donor agendas. Because in the NGO operations, they have independent. They have no political affiliation. They are non-political. They are non-governmental, but they come in to supplement where there is a gap that left by government programs. So they come in to supplement that gap. But when they are coming in, yes, the government doesn't look at it
as you conclude on that point,
because the government doesn't look at the principles solely as they are by the non-government organization, because they empower citizens to speak out. So when they are organizing engagements for citizens to hold governments accountable, and they pinpoint corruption tendencies, and where there are issues of poor governance. So because of that act of holding government accountable, they see the non-government organizations sometimes as competitors, sometimes as they are entering into their authority. So that's why you find in their operations, the government is always putting restrictive policies to check on the access to funding from foreign aid, to check on the engagements with the communities. For example, when these human rights organizations and good governance organizations, they normally monitor government programs. they normally point out things that are not working well.
Thank you, Florence, for that. And it's quite detailed, but it helps us understand exactly what these organizations are and certainly how they are present in our communities. And I want to now to hear from you, Tamali. Look, Florence here does. Kindly,
Yes.
I'm going to give you more time to add on that, but for now, let me first hear from Tamali. And I want to, because Florence talks about the non-government organizations and their presence in communities as auxiliary forces that assist government in trying to deliver the services people need. But I want you to help us in a detailed manner. Talk to us about what is the scope of activity of non-government organizations? What do they do in these communities, and how far can they go in delivering the services? Of course, looking at, for example, grassroots defenders initiatives. What do you do, and how much do you get involved in the communities, but also how do you relate with government in the activities you undertake as an organization? Yes, Tamali.
Thank you very much, Phillips. I wanted to first of all even add on something from what you asked Florence, but I'll just be brief there about the NGOs, the issues that arises between NGOs and government. By virtue of definition, a non-governmental organization is supposed to even be independent from government. But with the current trends, we have seen, I think there is no government that does not regulate NGOs, the operation of NGOs. Looking at the policies from different states, Uganda inclusive, looking at the processes of, first of all, acquiring operation licenses, permit renewals, tax compliances, and all the rest that NGOs are bound to, makes its independence null and void. Looking at the scope of what we do, and maybe what most NGOs do. What the presence of NGOs in every country is to offer alternatives, because we understand that each government of Uganda inclusive, has their services or has their programs in place already for citizens of their country. But NGOs come up because we see the gap. If at all we are looking at, let's say, to be specific, like in the human rights space, Uganda has a constitution. Uganda has a government with all the three arms of government: parliament, judiciary, and the executive. What do NGOs do in a situation like this is to offer the check and provide alternatives to these different arms of government for a smooth running of any sort of government that is in place. What I can add there is we have to agree that most of these arms of government have also issues. They have faults, they have loopholes in all their day-to-day operations. But NGOs would come up depending on what a particular NGO does. You will see that those, like in the humanitarian spaces, NGOs, they offer like alternative advices and support to both government and the citizens. Then those of us in the human rights space will be offering checks. We are doing the advocacy bit of it, where we see the loopholes. And how we relate with government is, from the current context, I can say that the platform is rough for most NGOs, especially in Uganda. The space is very rough, and you find that we enter most times into conflicts with government because that's how they see us. But why do we even enter into conflicts? It's because I believe someone or some people somewhere do not want to agree with alternatives. That's why we enter into conflicts. But if government agreed with the alternatives or is ready to debate alternatives with the NGOs, I think we wouldn't be in conflicts. But for now, I can only say, Phillips, that the terrain is not smooth for the people working in the NGO space and government.
Maybe if you allow me before I let you go on this round, how do you present these alternatives to government? Do you talk about them, do you publish them, or do you go ahead and implement the alternatives before consultations with government? How does it work?
Well, Phillips, we have regulations from the districts, we have regulations from the NGO Bureau on our scope of work and our jurisdictions and our mandates, perhaps. There are people who are mandated to provide direct services, but there are those of us in the spaces of advocacy, and this advocacy would bring it in. That's the alternative we offer: advocacy, calling for reforms in the different sectors, calling for reforms in the different institutions of government, say parliament, say judiciary. Where they fault, we advocate, and we do this sometimes on roundtable discussions when we are given opportunity, sometimes on topical discussion platforms like this one. This is a platform that will hear out there to the public, and I believe that it gets to their ears. So we use any available platform to offer these alternative advocacy programs that we are having.
Thank you, Tamali, for that, and it's quite good to say that. And as we continue the conversation, Cynthia, look, and this is very specific to you. You are from the Debate Institute, and government many times has challenges with how debate is moderated, inspired, and indeed taken on around the country. And these NGOs have been actually accused on a number of occasions of inspiring debate that is actually anti-government. What inspires the choice of topic, the choice of ideas, the choice of projects you choose to undertake as an institution in terms of offering that alternative, like Tamali told us, in the community where you participate, where you are active, where you try to deliver the changes you want to see? What inspires that, and indeed, how much do you consult government in making sure that the choice of activity you're undertaking does not collide with the interest of government? Yes, Cynthia.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip. So I think one, on consideration of the choice of topics that are largely discussed within debate, I would say it's a subjective thing to talk about what aligns with government versus what you're choosing to do as an NGO chooses definitely what we are also doing as Debate Institute Africa. But I think just to like straighten out certain things, you will realize that a lot of NGOs do not necessarily do the governmental consultations that we want to think. Most likely when you're writing your proposal, when you're setting out your NGO, you want to do it aligning with what the interests of the funders are. And that is where a lot of conflict between decisiveness of what is important for the government, for the people you're representing, or you're offering alternatives versus the funders. And I think this also speaks into the conflict between most of like the governmental organizations and bodies versus NGOs in general. But you will notice NGOs have different classifications. Now, like with Debate Institute Africa, in as much as it would like surpass for an NGO or it would surpass for something that is independent of government, you will notice that a lot of the funding is not donor-based. We are not going to sit down and draft proposals for donors in most cases. No, unless it aligns with a certain program or projects that can be implemented under DIA specifications. However, the choices are generally made out of what is necessary for society. The only way you can have independence is when you most likely tailor projects under you that you're able to push the way you think is right for them to be pushed. With most NGOs, you're getting funding. That means that you have to tailor make your activities dependent off of what the funders require out of you. Otherwise, you're not going to get the funding. I think we've seen examples of, like, if you've seen the popular lawyer in town, Male Mabirizi, he's been able to thrive within like his legal warfare type of action because he does not depend on what everyone is funding for. No, he gives you a perspective of what he wants to do, and it's now your choice to pull into that. Most organizations, however, will tailor make their proposals off of what you want, not what they want. And I think that's where a lot of the conflict comes in. So I think just in response, we usually choose these topics based off of what is necessary for society. Are we discussing the health sector within Uganda? Are we discussing the education sector within Uganda? It is dependent off of the suffering of people. It is dependent off of the structures and institutions that need fixing, that need repair, that need critiquing. And we think that within itself is like a proper channel in order to activate and incentivize discourse and discussion among young people within the country, within schools, and just, the whole country at large. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And Robert, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, Philip, I'm getting you and the colleagues.
All right, thank you so much. It's good to have you. And look, the biggest challenge per se here is financing. I hear everyone is talking financing, and indeed one of the proposals we intend to talk about today is the funding models for the NGO sector. First of all, how does the current funding model look like? And certainly so, what does it mean for any changes to be made on that model, particularly looking at the basket system that is government is looking to introduce, where all your monies are pulled together and certainly you draw from that one pool of funds to be able to run your organizations? What does it mean for an institution like the one you work for?
Thank you, colleagues. Just background that we operate more like an independent body, and for us to fully do what we are supposed to do as NGOs, we need that independence and semi-autonomous powers to do what we are supposed to do within the law. And if you check through the laws of the country, from the constitution to all these other laws that have been put in place, it still reflects on what NGOs are supposed to do. That for you to do what you are supposed to do, you cannot depend on the same person you are supposed to monitor. Because the current modules for the funding is the ones we have been using were quite flexible, and we had all that liberty to work within what was required and what is needed. The only thing, as we are talking about the current basket, is issues to do with mistrust. That government is not comfortable with how NGOs are operating. To them, they think that we are having a lot of money, and a lot of money means something different. This is about power issues now. It's not about the issue of creating a conducive environment where NGOs and the government are working together, but it's an issue where government feels threatened that the more we get the money, the more we may become powerful and render some of the government's functions may be powerless or useless to some extent. Because as you have noticed from experience and the colleagues, that when NGOs are operating in an environment, you find that communities appreciate the work they do, because there is a lot of involvement, the participation of communities in some of these programs, and also the programs are tailored towards community needs. But when you look at the government's approach, in some instances, you realize that it is a top-down approach, where the inputs from our communities are not appreciated. So that mismatch between our approaches and the government's approach creates sense of mistrust and the sense that maybe the more we get more values, the more resources, the more we are going to be powerful and we can easily challenge
So,
the
so maybe
status quo.
if you allow me
Yes,
briefly, why would
yes.
government be worried of an NGO that gets more resources, delivers a particular service to the people, say education, and indeed you're assisting government in making sure the people of that particular area are getting enough of that particular service? What would be the worry of government?
Okay, let me use this example. In some communities, we have had experiences of poor road networks, and you find communities coming up to work on their roads. But in due course, you find the same government coming and stopping the communities from working on the roads, saying this is not your work, it is the work of government. But somebody is saying we are suffering to access a service, yet originally communities used to do community work, working on whatever needs, if it is maybe water, if they can fence their water sources. If it is a road, they can clear some parts that can enable them to pass. But now instances have proven that when communities take up those responsibilities, government in one way or the other feel that the communities, by doing that, they're exposing the limitations of the government. But we need to go back to the core principles that what are NGOs supposed to do in this government or another government? Our work is simply to complement what government offers. And in some instances, the areas where government may not be offering to 100%, that is where we fill those gaps. They could be maybe offering a service, but there are some gaps. And it is our work, like for us in advocacy and civic education work, we identify some of those gaps and we say, government, in your policy X, you mentioned that every parish must have a primary school. But these parishes in this place don't have some of the things. Can communities come up and initiate this process so that once they have maybe land and some structures, government takes over? So those are some of the things that, unless government is willing to acknowledge that they cannot do 100%, we need each other to fill those gaps. And now the only
Thank
thing
you.
is, how do we ensure what we do fits into the government's priorities? And also, how do government ensures that where they cannot reach the NGOs to cover those areas? Just for the case of us, those who may have not participated in this government budgets, when government is making budgets and either at the district level, national level, they will always come up with the budgeted priorities, then they will, under somewhere, they will list underfunded priorities. And those are underfunded areas where they are looking at potential partners who can give them support. So when NGOs fill into such gaps, the best government will be doing is to appreciate what the NGOs are doing and to say, yes, can we come to a drawing board and sort out some of these issues that may be coming? Then there's somebody waking up and say, I think these people are doing one.
Thank you, Robert, for that submission, and it's quite an insightful one. And that brings me back to you, Mrs. Tumuheirwe. Look, we are discussing financing. First of all, how efficient is the current funding model for non-government organizations, to the extent that you people and indeed very many players in the NGO sector do not want to see any changes in terms of the funding? But two, what are the available options in terms of funding for the NGOs that are actually better than what government is offering in terms of creating one pool of funds where all the NGOs in the country can draw their funds from? Yes, Ms. Tumuheirwe.
Thank you for having me again. The the model of funding that government is proposing. Okay, you can hear me now?
I do hear you.
You don't hear me? You do hear me?
I hear you. I hear you. I do hear you. Please go on.
Thank you. Yeah, your question said that what are other sources of funding and why are they better than the basket funding? I want to say that
Yes.
each source of funding, the basket funding and other traditional modes of funding, each has the positive side and the negative side. That is my debate. Because while all the sources of funding, like bilateral and multilateral agencies, were giving out funding to NGOs, not all the NGOs were accessing those funding equally. So it also had some issues, and even NGOs would apply for a grant or a sub-grant for a specific project, but it had restricted reporting and timelines. For example, they would tell you, for us, we are in health, and you'll find not all the needs of community that you found out are being addressed, because they also always come with their objectives and their agenda. So when you are applying for their funding, you have to tailor it to their needs, to their objectives. You can look at a set of values and principles and the needs of the community and include them in that proposal. In most cases, they are short proposals of 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years. They are not programs which can entirely work on and accomplish or satisfy the community needs. That is one part, though it would be accessed by all NGOs from the grassroots, from the national, and even regional. Then they also it would have that dependency on the donor. Hello?
Yes, please go on.
Yeah, so it would have high dependency on the donors' priorities and cycles. So, for example, after COVID-19, there was a lot of teenage pregnancies in communities, especially here in Kigezi. But then when you are applying for call for proposals, you will find the donors were coming in with the issues of how to address the socioeconomic, how to address the post-COVID effects, but you will find it does not tailor to your specific needs. So that is one aspect where the original funding, traditional fundings had some issues, some pros and cons. Then when we look at the social enterprise model, it addresses the community needs, but it takes long and very few donors support it. For example, if you engage in coffee or if you engage, you literally not find a donor who has interest in facilitating or in funding your needs, building your capacity to take up that social enterprise model and succeed with it. Though it promotes self-sustainability, but it has some limitation between non-profit and profit activities. Then there is this crowdfunding and public donations. This depends on who knows you. For example, when they are funding, when you don't have any connection, you can fail to tap into the public donations. Although it strengthens local and international communities, it limits strong marketing and credibility. Then I also want to say that this other funding, the basket funding, which is being suggested by the national or by the government, it is good. It can have a financing mechanism where multiple donors contribute to a common fund managed by a lead agency, but it promotes coordination and efficiency and reduces duplication efforts. It encourages strategic alignment with national sector goals, but it may limit smaller NGOs' access to funding. It can become more bureaucratic or political in fund allocation. It risks centralized decision-making affecting grassroots impact. So in conclusion, traditional finance models give NGOs more individual autonomy, but often lead to fragmented programming. While basket funds promote nation and sector-wide impact, but it may challenge NGO independence and favor larger or more connected organizations. It is a hybrid approach, balancing autonomy and coordination, but can be most effective for sustainable NGO financing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Florence, for that. And very important, you mentioned sustainability in that. Tamali, when I come back to you, look, listening to those advantages of the basket model being proposed by government. You see, in primary school, my teacher used to tell me that he who pays the piper calls the tune. And when you listen to most of your submissions, you say that your projects, your ideas are tailor-made in line with the interest, with the values, with the desires of the funder. Government seems to have a point to the extent that you people are focusing on the interest of the donor who most probably is outside of the country and ignoring the interest of government and indeed the values of the communities you are in. How do you respond to that, Tamali?
Thank you very much, Phillips. Even before I respond, allow me disagree.
Please.
Oh, yes, thank you. I said allow me disagree with my colleagues, especially Florence, on the issue of the basket funding. I totally disregard and refuse the issue of basket funding on grounds of interest. Why is government interested in us collecting, in funders giving funds in one pool? When I bring in the aspect of interest, we should understand that every entity or NGO have their interest, funders also have their interest, and government have their interest. And in this context, whose interest would suppress the other more? Of course, it will be government. Now, government wants funds to be put in one basket, and their interest is always a priority. If the interest of the funder is on, let me give an example of governance, and the interest of the public also on governance, and government does not want an enlightened population on issues of governance, do we see that such funds will be allocated to governance? Of course, it is a no, because at the end of the day, it is the government who will be in charge of both the money, the regulation, and all the operations. Because if you can't operate if you're not even given the money, or you can't operate without abiding or to the regulations that has been put for you. If they say that, okay, we have allowed you talk about governance, but they are not touch on issues of elections, you are not going to talk about issues of elections. So that's the
Tamali,
yes.
If you allow me, in any society, and for this case, the society of Uganda, between the government of Uganda and whichever party is interested in putting some money in this country, whose interest should override the other? Is it the one of government or the one of the people from wherever they are that are interested in propagating a particular value in this community?
Yes, Phillips. Most of these funders are interested in what the public needs. And funders have a viewpoint, they have a lens of focus. For example, if a funder is interested in Uganda, a funder will first do an assessment need. What is Uganda lacking? What is, like let's say, let me give an example of, Florence talked about, I think she talked about early teenage pregnancies. If a funder looks at the statistics in Africa about early teenage pregnancies, and then the funder's interest is teenage pregnancies, the funder will look at which country has the highest number of teenage pregnancies, and that's where their focus will be. But again, when such a funder comes and finds that, okay, government is not prioritizing the need to end teenage pregnancy, but prioritizing the need to what? To block political party registrations, to block political operations, like that's government priority. That's where our debate now draws a line from, that the interest of government it's always suppressing, because at the end of the day, a funder is looking at the needs from the needs-based approach, and then the government is looking at pursuing their own interest, the interest that is satisfactory to their programming, to their operations, and the likes. And we are bringing just down to the reality that we have right now. And I love to talk about the issues of governance and human rights. Do you see that our government is interested in that? Even this issue of basket funding that has been proposed, me, I see that it is targeted. It is targeted on specific NGOs. You won't even see it like their interest is not about those humanitarian organizations. Their interest is in seeing to it that organizations that are doing advocacy work, organizations whose focus are on governance and human rights, do not have the funds to operate. It's a tactful move to just kick us out of operations, Phillips. This is a reality.
There is an option on this proposal that for those entities that think they desire to have their independent financial model, then they can apply to cabinet and certainly will get approved and continue with their work. Why not do that?
Now, it even worsens when you have to apply to cabinet. That's already a political move. We all understand the bureaucracy that comes with such things, the approvals. How about we think about the delay that comes with that? What if we are looking at emergencies? We talked about COVID response, we talked about malaria response, and then maybe cabinet is going to sit in the next 6 months, but there is a pandemic that has already befallen maybe a community like the Nordic disease, let's say in northern Uganda. And a particular funder wants to fund organizations specifically in northern Uganda who can help them do what? Sensitization on the Nordic disease and maybe treatment. And then they have to first apply to cabinet, but cabinet is sitting in the next 6 months. How do we relate this to the reality on ground? It is just baseless. Me, I call it baseless.
Thank you so much, Tamali. And look, Cynthia, I want to listen from you on this particular financing idea. You see, I have had a conversation from government officials who actually say that, you see, these non-government organizations have been portraying themselves as angels in our communities, yet when we now bring out measures that are going to hold them accountable, just like they say they've been doing to government, they are running away and they're not interested in being accountable. How do you respond to that? Do NGOs, or are they trying to run away from accountability in terms of making sure everyone and indeed their resources are known and how they are spent and when and where?
Yes, Philip. Thank you for bringing me into the conversation. So I'm going to say this. I genuinely think that we've taken the norm or the easy route of usually pushing everything to government. So any negative thing that happens, it's easy for us to scapegoat and blame government. And I think this is really problematic. All the previous speakers are saying NGOs are the alternative, they are responsible for checking government, they collaborate with government, and I do agree. Also, because of the state that we exist in, it means that as our alternative, you face double scrutiny more than the government even does. Because in the case that you successfully bring in the revolution, in the case that you successfully topple government, what fallback do we have? If the fallback is as equivalent to how negative government has been, it's unclear why you're the best alternative that people have. So I genuinely think that one thing NGOs need to embrace is the idea of scrutiny and accountability. We've looked at like the recent instances where, I think it was on Twitter, the conversation about Agora failing to be accountable to the funding that they had and how it was being used. And I think such things breed a lot of mistrust within the citizens. We say in as much as government is bad, is the alternative better? If it's not, then it's unclear why we should defend or support this particular alternative. So I do think the idea on accountability should be a prerequisite of every NGO. Even before government does it, are you doing it? But I think the second conversation, a lot of NGOs also scapegoat. We want to have the idea that funders are interested in helping you. They are most likely interested in the problems, the challenges that exist on your side, and that's what they want to solve, which is not ideally true. If you look at the return on investment from a lot of these NGOs, it is not worth it. You have incidents. Let's look at Karamoja. Karamoja has had one of the highest number of NGOs within time immemorial. But how many of those have been tantamount to economical development and empowerment for the people in Karamoja? You're teaching children, girls, how to make reusable pads. Do you think to some extent that they need the financial stability to afford things like soap, to afford things like detergent, to be able to wash these things? Do you think for some extent they need the economical liberation to be able to afford clothing so that when I shower, use this, you don't essentially have to like accumulate other diseases that now become a government burden to handle? I think these are the things that, or these are the conversations that we sort of need to have. What is the return on investment for NGOs within the financing? I will agree, we cannot have a basket fund for all NGOs. That with especially with the nature of government, I do agree. However, the independent scrutiny of NGOs also needs to exist. You cannot claim you want independence, but in the same time need a certain liaison with government. Obviously, that is definitely going to come with scrutiny because they're also a protectionist government trying to shield themselves. They will out you. They will constantly scrutinize you and put you out there in the public for people to bastardize you and check what it is that you're doing. And I think these are the like conversations around financing for NGOs that largely need to happen because we still question what the return on investment is, which I think is also a big purpose for like government in terms of the idea on scrutinization. But also, if we just look at the funding models, I think it's the basket fund, but then also the idea on how they're benchmarking with countries like Tanzania. I think let's be honest with ourselves as a country and look at the operation of NGOs in countries like Rwanda. They are scrutinized by government. There has to be an alliance of the program that you want to implement versus what is necessary for the people. We cannot constantly claim that NGOs are working with the will of the people. The question then is, for the MPs that you vote that align with your principles in society and present these things in parliament, should we say that the government agenda is not a people's agenda? If it's about governance, you understand governance in itself, when it's rotten, it becomes a problem for all other institutions that exist. It is what breeds the necessity of NGOs in themselves. So I think those are angles and areas that we also need to sort of think about and evaluate as we bastardize government and we contrast the better side to be NGOs. I think NGOs also need to accept, because you're the alternative of the people like you claim, you're going to be double scrutinized as opposed to government in itself, because we've already considered, we agree, government is bad, government has failed. What is the alternative and how does that alternative look like? Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Cynthia. And certainly Cynthia is telling us that government is not an alone evil. There are lots of other evils in society that we need to look at and certainly make sure we change them into saints once more to serve communities that we live in, that we desire to see in our country. And I see there are a couple of questions directed to you from Tamali here. I don't know if she wants to use some 30 seconds to make a reaction quickly to that before I go to Robert here. Tamali, as you are asking Cynthia the account of accountability, and certainly when you talk about you do compliance and indeed making sure you file reports to your donors, is it what you're referring to, Tamali?
Phillips, yes, I for this opportunity. You know, Cynthia is posing a lot of, I call it a burden on people who are already burdened. Yes, I brought an aspect of compliance. We have a lot of compliance issues to bear as NGOs. We have taxation, we have reports, we have like a lot of registration, permit renewals, and all that. And all this we shoulder with our little shoulders as individual entities. Government, a larger entity, should actually bear the biggest burden. If I would equate it in terms of percentage, if there is an issue, government is supposed to stand in to fill 60 or 70% of the burden. And yet, NGOs are trying to fill in while government is trying to exempt itself from certain things. Cynthia gave an example of offering training girls to use alternative the reusable pads and then failing to provide them soap. Don't you think that government was supposed to bear that burden of even training them to use reusable pads? I'm just using that as an example. So let us not look at we can do that NGOs can do everything, and yet we are so limited when it comes to resources, and government has this whole line of budget that is allocated to such ministries to do such implementations as well. Just that it is corrupted most of the time. That's why we see the need as NGOs to come in.
Thank you, Tamali, for that. And it's important you say that. Robert, I want, because when you listen to this conversation, it is sort of that we have, Cynthia, I'm going to give you a minute just after Robert to respond to that kindly. Let me first listen from Robert. You have this conversation that seems to be between government, which seems to be an entity somewhere, and NGOs, which are entities also in another corner. I want to hear from you. Why should citizens care about this particular confrontation that is going on between the NGO sector and indeed the institution of the government of the Republic of Uganda? Should citizens in any case care, and what can they do to make sure that the desired outcome, which is in the best interest of themselves, is realized from this whole event of things? Yes, Robert.
Thank you, Philip. Just that from the previous engagements, like the experiences we went through with I'm saying from the experiences we went through.
Yes, please continue.
Okay. So I was saying from the experiences we went through during the suspension of DGF, which was bringing together all those other partners and donors to a pool. And it was a learning experience to most of us. And also, one way or the other, the most affected people were the communities, because the services that were reaching them stopped and there was no replacement. And though we tried explaining that it was an issue which was going to be worked on, but still they felt that the government was harsh in its way of doing things. Because for them, they were looking at the objectives of most of the programs. For us, we were doing a program on civic engagement and community those civic empowerment and community engagement, where we're bringing together the leaders and the citizens on issues to do with service delivery. So when that suspension came, there was a gap. We could not organize some of the engagements, and those questions kept emerging. Why? Why is government fighting you people? What did you do wrong? But we have not been seeing anything wrong. So along the way, we also realized that government, one way or the other, is supposed to be considerate, and where there may be those challenges, you have to sit down on a round table and listen to parties and agree on the way forward. Now back to our question that, like in a family, when a mother and a husband or a father have conflicts, the most affected are the children. And you have noted from experience that when government freezes some accounts for other partners, those who suffer the most are those who are directly benefiting from some of those programs. The organization may survive, but the actual beneficiary, the rural person in the deep down in the community who may be receiving a service, could be a scholarship for his or her child, could be maybe this, you have had even experiences of these HIV extended services. And so when the government and NGOs are having issues, for us, we can maneuver around, but the other person who is innocent and who is supposed to be our target for all the government and the NGO feels the burden. And that is where you find that citizens are even at the forefront championing some of the things that, yes, government, you can still do your oversight role to ensure that all NGOs operating in a certain country abide by the laws. But also those laws should not be so stringent to the point that NGOs have no breathing space to even do what they are supposed to do. Because when we are looking at what government is proposing and what we are trying to say, yes, it is not bad, but experiences has shown us that once somebody controls some of your powers, then you may be a barking dog, but you cannot bite, because the
All right.
biting will limit the access to the financial aspects, which will also be a challenge. Then just to add something, that we have had the experiences also with the government implementing joint some programs where government appreciated the role of NGOs, and also communities bear the testimonies that when we work and ensure that we do what we are supposed to do, government does what they are supposed to do, at the end of the day, it is still the same government which has improvements in certain sectors where we are contributing. Because if I come to you as maybe assuming you are the chairperson LSC5 for a certain district and tell you that your chairperson, village X or sub-county X has no access to safe drinking water. That is not fighting the government. Instead, I'm just helping you to see what you're supposed to see, just like a mirror. It is not a problem for you to blame the mirror that it is reflecting what you are supposed to see. The mirror just shows you what is there, not what's not there. So, and the issue is experience, like where the challenges we have noted, especially in these areas. One, programs that endeavor on civic education, programs that do voter education, programs that handle accountability aspects, programs that are sensitive to government. Because there is a way government feels that maybe we are over putting pressure on them, because once citizens know the services a government is supposed to offer and how they can hold them accountable, and when you are not meeting those needs for the communities, citizens can easily say no, saying we made a wrong choice to put you in power, we can easily get somebody else. So let's see,
All
let's
right.
look at yes.
Thank you, Robert. I think if you can conclude on that point, please.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Let's look at that as a family, we are not working against the government, but our work is to work in order to complement what government is offering and to supplement as much as possible, not to fight, but to ensure that government is doing their part and we are also doing our part. The only thing will be now, how are we ensuring accountability in between? Do we account to our partners? Then do we account to government? Do we account to our beneficiaries who happen to be the community members? Those are now the three angles. We have to look at this relationship. If our communities get the
All right.
accountability.
All right. Thank you, Robert, for that. And it's important you mentioned that. And certainly he says they are not enemies, but partners to government in making sure they deliver the services the peoples of Uganda need to have access to. You are still on Community Voices Uganda, and we're having a conversation about the non-government organization and indeed the wider civil society sector, certainly with their interaction with the government of Republic of Uganda and the many good and bad experiences between the two partners of growth, progress, and development in the country. Colleagues, our time is very much fast spent. We have about 7 minutes to be out of here, but certainly I will give a minute to each of you to give me their final remarks in terms of what is the way forward in this whole scheme of things. And certainly starting with you, Cynthia, I know you had a response to make, but also as you give me that response, what does the future look like in this?
Okay, thank you, Philip. So I think just 30 seconds to the response and then to my final remarks. Something important was mentioned and said that we cannot shoulder the heavy burden as NGOs, and governments need to know when to step in. I think one, when you take up a responsibility, you must position yourself to be able to carry on that responsibility. We look hypocritical when we take on a responsibility and then start blaming every other person when we are unable to completely fulfill that. If you agree government has failed and you're stepping in to help government where it has failed, you have to be able to do it to entirety. If your claim is government is unable to fund some of these things, neither will the people, that's why you source external funders, it's unclear why those external funders cannot see the project proposals through, especially when you're able to highlight what is necessary within those particular communities. Accountability would look like what is the return on investment for the things you're doing in the society versus how people are able to profit from them. Because I think ideally, if we've considered that government is a failure, government is a sham, then we need to see the alternative working out and the alternative being different. Otherwise, you're just in the same boat, you're just in the same category. These are the hard conversations that I think as NGOs, being the alternative that exists for society, they have to have. I think these are the things that you just have to body. Also, the last thing, if you want to be independent of government, I don't see why all the methods that you take to be independent and register yourself in this country and be operational now all of a sudden seem like a burden, because businesses also have a certain separate set of things that they have to do. If it's taxes, it's by obligation. You may pay taxes as an NGO and think that is heavy, but as a citizen, day by day, I buy bread, there is a tax on it. I buy water, there is a tax on it. I buy juice, there's a tax on it. It's a shared collective responsibility anyways. So we cannot complain about the beginning of failure within systems is when we complain about responsibility or when we fail to embody responsibility. And then I think just finally, NGOs should take the light and the aspect that because they are the alternative, there is constantly going to be double scrutiny on them. But that also does not mean that we as people should shy away from holding government accountable to creating equitable spaces where these NGOs can work, because we do consider and agree that they are a necessity for society and we need them in order for there to be a certain level of, complementary action to where government has failed. So thank you very much for having me on today, and it was an enlightening conversation. Thank you.
Yes, let me hear from you, Ms. Tumuheirwe. What should be done for the future to see that there is sustainability in this NGO sector kindly, and if you can do that in about a minute. Kindly unmute and talk to us. You are muted. Yes.
Can you unmute me
Yeah,
from that?
please continue. You are muted. Let me see if I can do something about that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you?
Yes,
Right.
Can you hear me now?
I do hear
Can
you.
hear me?
Please proceed.
Please. In concluding remarks our way forward, I encourage collaboration rather than competition, aligning resources towards common development goals. And I beg that government regulate with fairness, partner with trust, operate with transparency, and include citizens' voices. I think in the future, government NGOs will increasingly work in partnership with government to provide sector and international agencies to co-deliver programs. This can work because we don't need to pinpoint on each other because we are serving the same community. And then, but stakeholder collaborations should become the norm, even the basket funding and the public-private initiatives. My sister talked about that the government has a bigger interest, but I want to say that when DGF was around, it was serving both in the government and the NGOs, and the work was moving on well, apart from government suspecting it that it was funding mostly the civic education and good governance, but otherwise it was working. Then I also, as a way forward, we should remain with both the basket funding and the traditional methods of funding working hand in hand. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Robert, what should the future look like for the NGO sector? Quite briefly.
Yeah, thank you. That as we appreciate each and every intervention by government, NGOs should also be able to demonstrate that they are trustworthy, they are transparent, they are accountable to government, to the communities we serve. And also what is more important is the mutual trust between government and the NGOs. We shouldn't be fighting as a family, but we should be more sitting in round tables and identify some of the things so that in case of a misunderstanding, it is simple to iron out in that way. Then the other thing is government also has an obligation to support the civil NGO world through either a same fund or a different fund. But what's important is having various sources can sustain some of the works of these NGOs than limiting, because not all the partners we work with will appreciate that it is good to put in one pool, because those ones also have their own trust issues with the government institutions. So it will be okay to have the normal traditional funding model and also the current where government is proposing, but it will not be very stringent to the point that if you are to benefit, you should be associated with a certain group in quotes for you to be maybe to be a partner, but should be open that people compete like we compete usually for proposals and the funding from different agencies. Otherwise, what is important is let us also clean our house and be one, so that when we are talking, we talk as one family, not that we are others are doing well, others are not doing what they are supposed to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Tamali, what should the future look like?
They say when you want to weaken your enemy, you attack the strongest arm. in the civil society or in the NGO space, we are strong with funds. And now these proposals that government is coming with is an attack. And I'm calling upon all civil society leaders, all people who are in the NGO world to rise up against this. Because without us standing up for this, we shall be rendered toothless, like the toothless barking dogs. You can't do much when your funds are being controlled by government. You can't really do much. I speak this strongly because those of us in the human rights space, like, we don't see ourselves there. We don't see ourselves there once this proposal is passed. And then also to government, you've suppressed us enough. The compliancy is too much. That, like, there is a lot that you've suppressed us with, but we are there, surviving. So please leave our funds alone. Thank you.
All right. Auma Tamali is the ED at Grassroot Defenders Initiative. Tamali, thank you so much for your time and indeed for the thoughts you've shared to the conversation. And we also had Robert Cheptoek. Robert is the ED at Kapchorwa Civil Society Organizations Alliance. Robert, thank you so much for your time and indeed for the thought you've shared with us. Miss Florence Tumuheirwe, ED Kigezi Women Involvement. Thank you so much for your thoughts and indeed for sparing time to join the conversation. And lastly, Cynthia from the Debate Institute of Africa. Thank you so much for joining us and for making time to the conversation. And certainly, this is a good conversation that we should perhaps have more and more of these conversations about the NGO sector and indeed how they go on progressively. And to you, our viewers, thank you so much for keeping it Civic Space TV and indeed Community Voices Uganda. Special thanks to the technical team and special thanks to the Center for Constitutional Governance and all our other partners for making sure this keeps happening. I am Philip Mulisa, and may you have freedom always.